Hey, gang. So today it's just me flying solo again, and I kind of went into leadership, power, and integrity, and how we can kind of build up trust and break down trust and define it so that we actually understand, like, when we say build trust, what does that actually mean and how do we do it? And I break it into three different definitions, but only end up focusing on one. And hopefully you can reflect on how you're undermining your own trust in yourself and with others around you without even realizing it. Because it's not about breaking promises and keeping secrets. It's completely different to that. And that's like a foundational layer of what it takes to build up your personal authority, the way you lead and the way you lead yourself and how you hold your power. So take a listen in today's episode and I hope that it adds a lot of value to what you do. Also, as a side note, I had this book on my desk and I thought, let's recommend it because it's got a lot of those moments where you feel really challenged and you just opens your eyes. And it's called Awareness by Anthony DeMello. If you haven't read it or heard of it or listened to it, go and do that after this podcast, of course, because it's a great book. And I'd really appreciate if anyone does get through it or they know it, like have a conversation with me. I'd love to talk about it. Anyway, enjoy the episode because I enjoy talking about it. Cheers. What's up, team? So I'm back, and it's just me tonight, your host, Don. Welcome back to the Identity Human podcast. So what am I talking about today? Well, I realize I actually haven't done much specifically around leadership. And I think it's specifically because, I mean, before I got into the world of leadership, when people started to define it, I switched off. I was just like, oh, this, what does that have to do with me? Because you immediately put it into this title or this place that I have to be a director or a CEO in order for me to be considered a leader. And therefore, we'll just park that. It's not like that leadership world. But actually, the deeper I've gone into it, the more I realize that essence of leadership is what we should all be chasing. We should all be going after. And what I mean by chasing is like, it comes around to everything that we're about, like Identity Human or myself, is like, you've got to learn to lead yourself. You shouldn't have to wait until you've got a title of director, business owner, or CEO, or managing director, or team leader for you to start leading. And that's the whole point. So I wanted to really emphasize those foundations of what I term leadership is very separate from business leadership. Business leadership, you have to know your KPIs, your strategy, your environment, your purpose, all those kind of things that are within the business. As you start to recognize the concepts are the same, you've got to apply those same things to yourself from a personal point of view. So I really want to focus in on that. So if you're listening and you're a mom, a dad, a business owner, or just someone that just has no responsibilities, is just yourself, this applies to you from a leadership point of view. Because whether you're experiencing it now or you're going to experience, it's really good to get your head around these concepts so your mind starts to play with them, toy with them, develop them. And I think specifically something I haven't spoken about, but I've always thought, oh, where would I, like, what talk would I want to do it? And it would be around power in leadership and the power you own over other people automatically when you get into a position of leadership. So specifically, if you become a parent or if you're a team leader, immediately become a position of authority. Now, if you've ever studied psychology, you've got some experience with psychological studies, or you've heard them via some Instagram account, or wherever the source has, there is a really interesting concept called like appeal to authority. So if you've studied scientific articles and journals and how to read through them, they've got, don't fall for an appeal to authority, as in someone usually says, listen to me, I'm a doctor. Trust me, bro, I've got a degree in nutrition. All of a sudden, that's an appeal to authority, because as human nature happens to be, when we will automatically put someone that's in a position of power into an authority, or that they know more than I do. So there's a study where they took volunteers and they put them behind a one-way glass, and they were with a person in a lab coat. So the lab coat represented authority, and they had an actor rigged up to an electric shock device, and they were doing maths questions, and they would have this dial of like electric levels. And so the volunteer that didn't know that it was a test or a psychological study would have to shock the person if they got the question wrong. So they would shock the actor, and the actor would pretend that they're getting shocked. And the amount of people that took the shock all the way up to catastrophic. And by the way, catastrophic was like, even on the dial, it said danger, life threatening levels of voltage. Some people were like, oh, this isn't right, but they still did it because the person in the lab coat was like, just do it. I'm telling you, do it. It's fine. You just do it. That person's making a meal of it. But the actor would go crazy, like crying, please don't do this. How can you do this to me? And they would still shock them. I think it was up to 80%. So, there's always going to be the outliers that they know better in the right situation. But the whole point is, like, be careful of and appeal to authority if you're under leadership, or if you are using leadership as an example or people to follow, right? And the more important thing is like, if you are in a position of power, understand that position of power that you've got. Now, I think it's one of those really hard for us to recognize until we've actually been through it and we realize what kind of influence we can have over others. So if you are a parent, I think you underestimate the influence you have over your kids just because you are their parent, their mom and their dad. And specifically for the dads, they're like, what kind of position you are in to lead your family, for example. So, I was listening to a mastermind tonight, and yes, and the guy was talking about, like, he wanted his wife to change, he wanted his family to change, but his ego got in the way of him recognizing that his family was a direct reflection of who he was and how he was. And he made an interesting point, because how many of us have like made an error, or we get stuck in a cycle of wanting to change but not changing, and then it gets to a point where we make a mistake and you have a fight and you're like, flip, okay, I'm so sorry, I'm taking responsibility for it, I'm going to change, I promise I will change, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. And then that goes on and on and on, but you don't actually change. So that's undermining your authority. I'm putting in inverted commas. I don't mean like in a lab coat. I mean your integrity, for example. And it was funny, like, this guy that was talking said, the only way you can actually lead or show people that, like, your integrity is there, by doing over and over again without saying anything, by leading by example. And I really like that, because it's very similar. If you think about, like, if you've ever heard some of the podcasts with me and Ray before, she talks about, like, the cold showers. I had to do them for a year before she even thought about doing them. Now she does them. But if I told her to do them, she never would have done them. Now, if you are thinking, Don, what does this have to do with anything? If you've said to yourself, I need to make a change, I'm going to change, or you've said, it's like, first of all, you're undermining yourself if you're not taking the action. And, like, you can't lie to yourself. I'm big on that. Lead yourself before you lead others. You can't hide from what you've got in the back of your mind. So if you are a person that keeps saying, I'm going to make a change, but you actually don't, I really want you to think about, like, maybe make the change smaller, and don't, like, build up your integrity. Don't lie to yourself, because you can't hide from your own truth. And then one layer further than that, if you say to your wife or your husband, depending on which side of the fence you sit here, that, like, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, I'm going to change. Or you say, I'm going to set these goals and I'm going to start to wake up now, I'm going to start to do this. Every time you don't do it, you're undermining your own integrity, which breaks down trust between you and the person that knows it, whether we like it or not. So, there's trust can be broken down to 3 levels. There's honesty, integrity, and not honesty. I was just busy reading off my reading off my core values from school. Trust, because I've got a school story, by the way, that's where it links. Trust can be broken down to competency, benevolence, and integrity. So competency is like, are you good enough at what you do for me to give you something to do? Like, can I ask you to hang up a picture? Like, are you competent to do that? If I can trust you to do it, I'll give you that job. If I can't trust you, I'm not going to give it to you. But the benevolence is, are you here to do good? Or are you going to stab me in the back? So, the meaning to do good, the well meaning. And then the integrity is, if you say you're going to do. Now, from a leadership perspective, that's one of the core elements I think is missing. And when I say lead yourself. Like, how often are you breaking down your own trust in yourself by not having the integrity that you think you should have, by saying, I'm going to do it, and you don't actually do it, setting up these big goals, and then you're just learning to fail. So I want us to really think about anything that you've committed to wanting to do and not carried on and gone, it doesn't matter. Like, have you said to yourself, oh, it's okay? Or I think, and this is where maybe I get slightly elitist or like high performance-y, is like, do you have people around you that constantly reinforce you've got a lot going on, you're tired, you don't have to be perfect, you don't have to do this, it's okay? Now, there is a time and place for that, don't get me wrong. But I also think there's a time and a place for not filling our heads with those kinds of thoughts where essentially they're undermining your capability to deal with what you've got going on. Because someone that genuinely do care about you and they genuinely are saying, like, don't take on so much, you've got this going on, like, I feel really sorry for you, you're all okay. What they're doing is they're saying, oh, like, can you really handle this? We want to have people around you that reinforce your potential, your talent, your capability, and support you, so that you can learn to trust yourself. And you've got to start to learn to trust yourself by, if you say you're going to do something for yourself, even if you don't tell anyone else, like, follow through on that. That's way more important than you give it credit for. So if you started out on a challenge and you didn't follow through, like, that's, you didn't follow through. So you're breaking down your own trust, your own integrity. So when you go out into the big bad world, you're going out on shaky foundations. Does that make sense? If you're with me. So I'm hoping I'm nailing into a core element for whoever needs to hear this, is like, let's start with our integrity. And if you are really struggling, like if you're like, Don, I'm desperate. I've been in a position and I recognize the cycle I'm in, but I keep coming back to that same thing. Like, I want to make a difference. I start, and then after about 3 weeks, I die off. Remember, your intention is there, but perhaps you're trying too much too quickly. So scale it down. Like, I want to really start to build, like, from a leadership trust. I'm going to keep saying leadership, but remember, it's like, it's your character that we're really talking about. Like, if you can lead your own character, you can lead others, you become a leader. Leading as a parent, leading as a business owner. It doesn't, like, don't worry about defining leadership in business and in, like, globally. Like, I'm talking about you and you and you. I want you to start to learn how to lead yourself by building up your own integrity, and you can start small. Some people, if they say, let's say 75 hard challenge that was going around, some people have the ability to already take on that 75 hard challenge and see it all the way through. Why? Well, the things you don't see is they were already working out 5 days a week. They were already doing things. They don't have kids. They don't have lots of kids, or they've got lots of resources available to them. So it's easier. Like, it's never easy. It's easier for them to pick up something, especially when they're in a good rhythm already. In comparison to you, that, like, if you're like, 75 hard challenge, I'm going to take that on, but you've got kids, business that taking up all your time, and suddenly you're having to find a consistent rhythm where you haven't got one at all. Like, those are the things that no one tells you about, that lacks context when you all decide to take on a 75 hard challenge. And then you fail after 30 days and someone else is still going, and then you judge yourself, and then you said, like, I'm not good enough. So you've undermined your own integrity and you feel bad about yourself. So actually, what I want you to do is try and think about what's one thing that you've been trying to do that you haven't followed through with, and just scale it right down. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say, for example, you've been wanting to do 5 walks a week. You want to start walking in the morning. Scale it down to pick one day in the week that you go for a walk, and just do that. And if it's even big because you don't have time, like, don't try and go for a half-hour walk. Just, even if you walk out the door and go for a 10-minute walk or a 5-minute walk, that counts, because you've got to start somewhere. Now, I will say that this is definitely contextualized to, like, if you've done nothing, you got to start small and build up. But if you're already walking 5 days a week and you want to make a change in something else, like, think about how you can build up on these things. Because if you're not careful, you're going to constantly be breaking down your own integrity. If you're breaking down your own integrity, you're breaking down trust in yourself. If you can't trust in yourself, it's going to be very hard for you to build trust with other people. It's very, very hard for you to connect with them on a deeper level. So that's what I want to think about. Now, another element that I really want to talk about, and this was like a school, where the school story comes in, is power. And this is probably specifically to when you lead others. Let's say you're a parent or you're in a team. Now, when you have the title of leadership or the mantle of leadership, the responsibility of leadership, whatever that is, like, do you really understand power? Like, do you really understand what that does to you when you're in a position of power? Have you ever been tested in that or not? And I think very few people have actually been in there. And if you have, sometimes you're doing it on such a big stage that you can't recover. Now, I'll take you back to when I was at school and I was in Form 2, as in this is the first year in senior school, and I've arrived from Zimbabwe in a new country, new school, very military-esque, very bureaucratic in approach, very like military, like you can't walk on high ground. You have to say please at the end of every sentence. But there was a very shouty type of authority. So you had some prefix so the prefix, and we had what was called face testing. So you had break time. Once a week, you had to stand to attention outside. So stand stand like a military salute. You're about to salute, but you're standing there, and you stand in a queue outside the prefix study. Now, you may think that this is an over exaggeration, but genuinely all you heard was shots like, "Why are you doing this? What are you doing?" Like second former. So they would call you second former. They would just shout at the top of their lungs. It's like having 15 mini Hitlers just like on this power trip, right? So this is the experience you've got of like, this is how we need to be as prefects. This is like, when I'm a prefect one day, I'm going to do that because it scared the living daylights out of me. When we were in our quadrant, like our quad at break times, if a prefect walked in to the quad, you had to keep quiet, stand to attention, and stop doing what you're doing because they would come and do like quad inspections. And so you'd have to keep quiet. So there was basically a lot of shouting, a lot of like authoritative approach on that relationship between the people in authority, the prefects, and the second formers. So by the time I got to become a prefect, and bear in mind, like my junior school, I was head boy. We never, like you're a junior school, right? So you never think that because you're head boy, you're in a position of power. You would always like, I remember genuinely you connect with everyone. It was what I would probably consider how we should all be from a leadership perspective. Like you're there to help, support, be an upstanding, like you're carrying the values of the school and you are equal to everyone. But it was like almost a flip of that when I went to school. And I wish I'd had different mentors or different approach or something to help guide me, because boy, I look back and I must have been an absolute knob as a prefect, because I used to just take on what scared me the most when I was in second form, and that was that shouty prefect. And I thought that's how you get authority, that's how you get responsibility, by shouting at them. So I would generally lose my cool if someone was like, say, names testing or teams testing and they got it wrong. I'd be like, "Don't you care about the school?" I'd shout at them. I don't remember seeing this, but I even think that there was once that one of the boys pissed their pants. I don't know if it's because he didn't tell me he wanted to go to the toilet or if he was genuinely scared, but I lost it. And I look back and I'm like, what on earth was I doing? I also remember walking into the second form quad when I was a prefect, and if there was like, I remember walking in, then if people weren't standing to attention, I would absolutely use my rag. Like, "What are you doing? Go to the prefect study, like punish, like you." But if I was watching me as a second former, I would have been like pure anxiety, pure like fear. I would have scared the living daylights out of me. It was like my worst thing. And I remember walking through the quad once with the head of prefects, the teacher, Mr. Fienstra, and we walked in there and everyone just went quiet. It was dead silence. And as we walked and we did an inspection, as we walked off, he says, he's like, "That's impressive. I've never seen a quad go so quiet and so dead still like that." And he was impressed. But you know what? In the back of my mind, I was like, it's because I know that I'd lose my rag with him. Like there is an absolute fear of God in those kids. And that's why they respect me. And it took me a while to realize that, like, how wrong that was, like how I'd used power in completely the wrong way. I don't think I would have inspired any of those second formers to want to be like me. They probably would have had a fear. Like, yes, I played first team rugby, I played first team water polo, but like, I actually sometimes think if I wanted to challenge my character, I would go and see if there were any second formers that remember me and just ask them what they thought of me as a person, as a prefect, because I don't think I was a very nice individual, because I had I had power. And it's always been something that's on my mind. It'd be interesting to talk about and like understand if anyone's been in somewhere similar, if you listen to this, or if you are in a position of like leadership and power, like, do you understand how if anyone's giving you the advice of like, you have to be authoritative, you have to be assertive, you have to be a direct, like what that does to the person receiving your message when you're in a position of power. Like I almost think it's the wrong kind of advice to be giving if you are meant to be inspiring people to do things that they didn't know they want to do. If you're meant to be getting people to develop and raising up those around you, you don't do it by using fear. You don't use it by using authority. That's like, if there's life and death, that's the situation where you can perhaps shout at people. It's probably the only situation where you should shout at people. But there's far too often that you see the wrong kind of advice being given. For me, I've very few people I think would have gone through that experience, unless you were maybe in military. But a military, again, like that's life or death. If someone's not doing it right, you've killed someone else. So I completely understand the context for it. But Jack, I see sometimes the advice given or people approaching it, and like they are so harsh, and they don't realize that they've already got the business owner title, they've already got the director title or CEO title, and they still then choose to use fear-based motivation or harsh tone. And I think it's especially important to recognize that if you're a parent, like you losing your cool, and this is a big one for me because I still sometimes will shout at my kids, and I think it's not on. It's something I'm definitely working on, but I always take responsibility with them if I end up shouting them, and I immediately go like, it's not you, like I still love you unconditionally. I hope you realize that this is not the way that we should be doing things, and I'm leading by example to see how I can change that. Now it's because I know on the receiving end how that feels, and I think that's sometimes like experience and leadership. Like I want us to be able to start to raise our like level or standard of role modelship, but really think about what that means from a leadership perspective. Because if you've been listening to all of the Identity Human podcasts and what we're about, it's definitely about raising your own bar, raising your own level, raising your own standard to get the most out of your potential. And that means understanding that you can't have power and think, oh, when I'm a leader, I won't be like that person. So how many times have you heard a story of like when someone's completely abused their power and you go, oh, I wouldn't do that. Essentially you're saying I'm better than that person, but you have no idea what it's like to be in a position of power and what you would do with your character at that level. I think that's what you've got to really understand, why we should work on ourselves, why we should be self-aware, why we should understand both the good and the bad in any situation, is because you need to be able to be prepared from a character level, from any level where you're going to be holding a responsibility where others may look up to you in any sort of way. And also, on the flip side, if you are being led by people like this, understand that it's okay not to listen to them if they're shouting. It's okay to challenge back. It's okay to understand that the person leading you needs to be the right person leading you. They don't just get to be the authority because they are in that authoritative position. You're allowed to make sure that those around you and those leading you are leading you in the right direction. So it's definitely as a back and forth thing. I think this is I'd love to be having this conversation with someone because there'd be so much gold dust out of it. But I didn't really have a plan tonight, and sometimes that goes really well. I was just looking through some of my notes, and there was one where I just it was a Stanford prison experiment, which is people in authority and how you start to behave when you have that title. Then I had, my school was what I've just spoken about, and shouting, and it's like that power that you feel within, that power, the raw human nature that you have to learn how to harness and understand it so you don't bring it out. It's like, I don't know if you've ever heard Jordan Peterson talking about, like, it's not the fact that you're not a violent person at all. It's the fact that you understand that you're a violent person, but you know how to control it. You know how to not put it out in the wrong context. You know how to hold your own. So it's the same as, if you have felt powerful emotions, it's not about suppressing those and going, I shouldn't feel these. It's about understanding that they're there, but how to temper them properly. And that's the same thing I want us to think about from a leadership perspective, from leading yourself, is like, try and understand both the good and the bad of what you're trying to achieve, like with that personal growth, with responsibilities, with any level of raising up that you do in life. Like, you will always hold some form of authority over someone else in one way or another, whether it's by title or just by them seeing you in a position of leadership because you are a role model to them. And how do you embrace that? How do you hold that responsibility? And do you recognize it first and foremost? So, by the way, if you are in a position of responsibility, let's say you wake up tomorrow and then all of a sudden you become a role model, it's too late to start practicing then. Well, it's never too late. But the best time to do it is now. Like if you're listening to this and you go, what should I be working on? Like work on your character, work on like pushing yourself, testing yourself, and embracing the things that you're trying so hard to control and suppress, and understand that if you suppress them, they are only going to come out when you're stressed and when you're pressured. So actually start to deal with them and let them out and start to accept that they're part of you, but that you are leading them. So, I mean, another analogy that I often give is if you ever heard the good wolf and the bad wolf, and it's just whichever one you feed. And sometimes that can become overwhelming because like, oh, I just feel like my bad wolf is the dominant one. And I keep getting angry, or I keep overeating, or I keep having these same stressful thoughts. I've actually created a picture, and I want you to think about this: is picture a silhouette of someone walking, and that someone is you, like this overcoat, dark, through a dark forest, and you're on this moonlit pathway, and you're walking, and you look hardcore, right? You look really hardcore. But just behind you are these two wolves. One's white with blue eyes, one's black with red eyes. And that picture should symbolize the fact that you don't just have a good wolf and a bad wolf. You have both, and they both serve a purpose, but they're both led by you. So you have to first learn to lead your good wolf and the bad wolf so that you know which context you need that bad wolf to come out. You want an angry, powerful beast to come out that like loses control. Someone's robbing your house. You don't want to be a good person, right? You want to defend your castle. But you also need to know like when that the white wolf with blue eyes, that's the one that you want in the right circumstances. But you're in control. You're leading that pack. It's not the other way around. So I hope that imagery, some of the things we talked about, are going to help you in your current journey with whatever you're going through or wanting to change into. So if this episode did resonate with you, please leave a comment, reply to the emails that we do send out. Just let me know that you want more of this. Or if you've got any questions, that would be even better. I'd love to do a Q&A session with some of the questions of people that listen to this, because there is so much more to talk about when it comes to leadership and self and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, and I think it's important, and I think we need to start to recognize leadership isn't about business. It's about you. It's about the standards that you set. I will speak both to women and men, but obviously from my point of view, I am a man. So that leadership responsibility from the provider point of view, yes, we're modern day world and both can do it, but there is an innate sense of something that you'll never be able to get away from as a man, regardless of whether you bring in money or not. Like, how are you leading yourself? How are you leading that family? Because it's an important balance to keep, masculine energy versus feminine energy, and how you balance that and understanding that kind of stuff. So if there's any of those themes you want to hear about or listen to, reply to the emails, put comments in the podcast, anything. I'd love to hear from you guys. And I really appreciate you all following along. There's been some comments on YouTube. You guys are amazing. And thank you for listening and finding me. I really want to give as much value back as possible to you guys with what I know. So the more guidance I have from you, the more I know I can create what's relevant, as opposed to just talking, and even that's going to be relevant. So remember, I sign off the same way I always do. I'll work on me for you if you work on you for me, right? Ubuntu, we are who we are through others. That's even on my shirts, right? Have a great day. I appreciate you all.